I used to believe that telling the truth could fix anything. That honesty was always the right choice. That no matter how painful the truth was, it was better than silence. I believed that if you confessed bravely enough, with regret in your voice and sincerity in your eyes, the person you loved would eventually understand. I was wrong, because some confessions don't heal relationships. Some confessions don't bring clarity. They don't create a fresh start. Some confessions arrive not as redemption, but as an ending. This is the story of how one confession, spoken calmly, carefully, and honestly, destroyed my marriage. Not because the truth was cruel, but because the truth came too late. Part 1. Before the confession. Before I confessed, our marriage looked normal from the outside. Not perfect, not romantic, just stable. We had routines. We paid bills. We talked about work, schedules, and responsibilities. We lived in the same house and shared the same bed. And to most people, that was what a successful marriage looked like. But inside me, something had been growing quietly for years. A weight on my chest. A truth I carried alone. Every morning, I told myself, I'll say it today. Every night, I found a reason not to. It's not the right time. They look happy today. I don't want to ruin this moment. And so I waited, and waiting became a habit. The confession wasn't about one dramatic mistake. It was about small choices, repeated quietly over time. Choices I justified because nothing physical happened. Choices I minimized because I didn't want to see myself as a bad person. But deep down, I knew the truth would change everything once spoken. Part 2. Why I stayed silent. People often ask why someone hides the truth. The answer isn't always selfishness. Sometimes, it's fear. I was afraid of hurting them. Afraid of losing the life we built together. Afraid of becoming the villain in their story. Silence felt like protection. At least, that's what I told myself. But silence doesn't protect love. It stretches guilt over time. And guilt changes how you show up in a relationship. I became distant without meaning to. Less present, less open. They noticed. They asked if something was wrong. And every time I said no, the confession grew heavier inside me. Because lying isn't just about words. It's about what it turns you into. Part 3. The confession. Part 3.1. The night I couldn't delay anymore. The confession didn't come when I planned it. It came when I ran out of excuses. There was no argument that night. No raised voices. No anger pushing the truth out of me. Just a quiet heaviness that made silence unbearable. We sat across from each other, and I realized I had been rehearsing this moment for years. Every version ended the same way. Loss, distance, an ending I was too afraid to name. Part 3.2. Saying the words out loud. English. My voice sounded unfamiliar to me. Calm, too calm, as if I were talking about someone else's life. I didn't rush. I didn't soften the truth. I chose honesty without decoration. And with every sentence, I felt something irreversible happening. This wasn't information anymore. It was transformation. I could feel the past rearranging itself in their mind. Moments we once called normal were being relabeled as warnings. Part 3.3. The silence after. Silence followed my confession, but not the kind that waits for a response. The kind that absorbs everything. I watched their face change slowly. Not with anger, not with tears, but with realization. That quiet moment when someone understands the life they believed in no longer exists. I wanted them to yell, to react, to break something, because anger would have felt temporary. But this silence felt permanent. Part 3.4. What confessions really do. That's when I understood something painful. Confessions don't clean the slate. They stain it. They turn what we had into what I missed. My confession didn't just reveal my actions. It changed how I was remembered, and that realization broke something inside me. Part 4. After the confession. Part 4.1. The days that followed. English. People think the hardest part is confessing. They're wrong. The hardest part is what comes after. The days that followed were quiet, but not peaceful. Every conversation felt like walking on broken glass. Careful, measured, emotionally distant. We still said, "Good morning," but it sounded like a habit, not affection. Part 4.2. Trust after truth. Trust doesn't break loudly. It dissolves. Slowly. Quietly. I saw it in the way they listened to me now. As if every word needed verification. As if sincerity was no longer assumed. Love without trust becomes surveillance. And I could feel that shift happening. Part 4.3. Living beside the end. We still lived together. Still shared space. still slept in the same bed, but emotionally, we were already separate lives. I realized something devastating. The marriage didn't end when I confessed. It ended when silence became easier than honesty. Part 4.4. The truth no one talks about. Confessions don't save relationships. Timing does. And I waited too long. Not because I didn't love them, but because I was afraid of losing them. And in the end, that fear became the very thing that destroyed us. Part 5.1. After everything was said, after the confession, I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong again. The hardest part wasn't speaking the truth. It was living in the world that truth created. A world where nothing felt stable anymore. Where every smile felt fragile. Where every quiet moment felt heavier than before. We tried to act normal. But normal had lost its meaning. Because once trust cracks, even silence sounds different. Part 5.2. The slow emotional goodbye. There was no official ending at first. No clear decision. Just two people slowly drifting further apart. Conversations became shorter. Eye contact became rare. Touch became careful, almost hesitant. I realized something painful. You can stay married on paper long after the relationship has ended, emotionally. We weren't fighting anymore, but we weren't choosing each other either. And that quiet indifference hurt more than anger ever could. Part 5.3. The moment I understood the real ending. One morning, I woke up and felt nothing. No panic, no fear, just clarity. That's when I knew the marriage was already over. Not because of the confession itself, but because of everything that came before it. The silence, the delay, the years of not saying what mattered. The confession didn't end the marriage. It only revealed that it had ended long ago. Part 5.4. What I learned too late. I learned something that still haunts me. Honesty isn't just about truth. It's about timing. And courage doesn't mean confessing eventually. It means speaking before silence becomes permanent. I thought I was protecting them by staying silent. In reality, I was protecting myself. And that self-protection cost me everything. Part 5.5. Message to the listener. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, please don't wait the way I did. Don't tell yourself, later. Don't convince yourself silence is kindness. Because silence doesn't preserve love. It slowly replaces it. Speak while there is still something to save. Not after the ending is already written. This has been spoken by Reddit. Real confessions, calmly told. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If this story stayed with you, if it made you pause, reflect, or feel a little less alone, consider subscribing to Spoken by Reddit. We share long, honest stories, calmly told, for those quiet moments when listening feels easier than speaking. New stories are added regularly. Thank you for being here, and for listening all the way to the end.